In 2005, the world was shaken by an unprecedented heist. The vault of the Central Bank of Brazil in Fortaleza, considered impenetrable, with thick concrete walls, an electronic alarm system, and 24/7 surveillance cameras, was breached. In just one weekend, more than $70 million in cash vanished, without a single gunshot or alarm. The answer was almost unbelievable. An 80-meter tunnel, secretly dug for months by the thieves, right under the bank's nose. One of the most modern vaults in South America, the pride of the financial sector, collapsed before humanity's oldest weapon, the shovel. But let's look back at history. Over 800 years ago in Europe, there were medieval castles that faced enemies far more terrifying than this. An army of 40,000 soldiers, equipped with catapults, siege ladders, and all manner of heavy weapons, laid siege to a small fortress for 2 long years. They tried to break through the walls, to burn down the gates, to destroy the moat, yet every attempt failed. In the end, that mighty army was forced to retreat in exhaustion, abandoning their dream of conquest, while the fortress still stood tall against the grim sky. How could it be that a structure built only from stone, wood, and medieval ingenuity proved safer than a modern bank protected by laser grids, motion sensors, and steel harder than diamond? The answer lies in the wisdom and patience of those nameless engineers of the past. They turned moats into natural traps, made walls serve not only to block but to strike back. And above all, they turned time into an ally. The longer the siege lasted, the more the enemy was drained, while the fortress remained unshaken. It is no surprise that some castles were designed with such perfection that, even today, military historians continue to study their defensive systems. And if one needs the clearest proof of this difference, look no further than one of the legendary fortresses of the Middle Ages. A structure not merely for shelter, but engineered as a colossal stone war machine, where every detail was calculated to make the attacker pay the price. Amid the Orontes Valley in Syria, on a gentle hill, rises a massive block of silvery grey stone that dominates the landscape. This is Krak des Chevaliers, the brightest jewel of medieval fortress architecture. Krak is not merely a fortress, it is a stone killing machine, engineered down to the smallest detail to turn every attempt at assault into hell. From the outside, it looks like a grand castle, but in reality, it is an enormous death trap. Built and expanded by the Hospitaller Knights in the 12th and 13th centuries, Krak was once a key Crusader stronghold. It was not just the residence of several thousand knights, but also a stone war machine, where every corridor, every wall, and every window was designed with death in mind. A French historian once wrote, "If you want to understand the military genius of the Middle Ages, just look at Krak des Chevaliers. It is the summation of everything people of that era knew about defense." The most impressive feature of Krak is not the thickness of its walls, though in some places they are up to 7 meters thick, but the way those walls are layered. Imagine you are a besieging soldier. After days enduring a rain of arrows, you finally break through the outer wall. You cheer, thinking victory is near. But in front of you stands another wall, taller, stronger, and not just one, but a whole series of concentric walls, stacked like onion layers. Each ring of walls has its own towers, its own corridors, its own gates. If the outer ring falls, the inner one still stands, independent and defiant. It is estimated that Krak possesses between 12 to 17 independent defensive systems, meaning, to bring it down, an army would have to win 17 consecutive sieges. Krak also knew how to turn terrain into a weapon. The road leading up from the base of the hill to the main gate does not run straight, but winds like a serpent. Attackers are forced to turn again and again, and every turn is a trap. From above, archers and crossbowmen were ready to rain arrows down. Near the gate, enemies faced the execution chamber, a narrow passage squeezed between two walls, with murder holes above, round openings through which defenders could pour boiling oil, hurl stones, or shoot arrows directly onto the heads of intruders. To smash through the thick wooden gate, you would have to stand still, head lowered, hammer in hand, while from above, death poured down like rain. Every corner of Krak is crowned with a watchtower, not only to observe from afar, but also to create deadly crossfire angles. When you pressed up against the walls, thinking you had escaped the rain of arrows, crossbowmen in the towers could still aim straight down at you from the sides. There is no safe place, no blind spot. Let us follow in the footsteps of an attacker advancing into Caerphilly Castle in Wales to experience the psychological warfare etched into every brick and stone. Built in the 13th century by Gilbert de Clare, an ambitious Norman lord, Caerphilly is not only the largest fortress in Wales, but also one of the most expansive castles in all of Europe. Its sheer size alone is staggering, covering more than 12 hectares, almost like a miniature city. But what makes Caerphilly truly remarkable is not its scale, but the way it used water as a weapon of war. Most medieval castles relied on stone walls, shallow moats, or rugged terrain for defense. Caerphilly, however, chose a different weapon: water. Surrounding the castle was a vast system of artificial lakes and canals. Dams were built to divert rivers, flooding the entire area. The result? Caerphilly became a stone island in a sea of water, cut off from the outside world. This had two deadly effects. First, it neutralized siege weapons. Giant trebuchets and battering towers, machines that needed to be placed right against the walls, could no longer be hauled across the water. Attackers were forced to come by boat, making them easy prey for defending archers. Second, it created an invisible barrier. Even if enemies breached the outer walls, they struggled to transport supplies, weapons, or simply sustain a large army across the expanse of water. In truth, Caerphilly had turned nature itself into a second wall, a wall that could never be broken. Records tell of a siege in which enemies tried to dig tunnels under the walls to collapse them. The defenders of Caerphilly did not panic. They simply opened a sluice, letting water from the lakes pour in, turning the tunnels into mud until they collapsed. The attackers, who thought victory was near, drowned beneath water and rubble. In another case, besieging forces set up camp on higher ground nearby. The defenders opened the dams, releasing floods that swept through the enemy encampment, destroying food supplies and weapon stores. At Caerphilly, water was not only a barrier, it was an active weapon, ready to strike at any moment. Like Krak de Chevaliers, Caerphilly also understood the psychological art of war. Its main gate was built as a long, narrow corridor, flanked by thick walls and blocked by multiple iron portcullises. An enemy pushing inside might think victory was close, only to realize they were trapped in a stone tunnel. Above, murder holes waited. Behind, the iron gate dropped to cut off retreat. Ahead, another gate remained firmly shut. Every step into Caerphilly was a step deeper into a psychological trap, one that broke the enemy's spirit even before a single drop of blood was shed. If Krak des Chevaliers was the fortress of the Crusader knights, and Caerphilly was the symbol of nature weaponized, then in England there was another castle that combined both elements and added a new weapon: psychology and propaganda. That was Warwick Castle, lying beside the tranquil River Avon, yet for centuries one of the greatest centers of power and terror in the Midlands. Built in the 11th century by William the Conqueror, Warwick was originally nothing more than a wooden motte and bailey fort on an earthen mound. But gradually, it expanded into a massive stone complex with towering walls, watchtowers, moats, and fortified gates. By the 14th century, Warwick had become one of the most impressive castles in England, not just for its scale, but because it was designed to crush the enemy's spirit even before the battle began. Warwick was famous for its system of gatehouses, built thick, layered, and deadly. To reach the heart of the castle, invaders had to pass through a sequence of gates: the outer gate, the middle gate, and the inner gate. Each one was armed with a portcullis, an iron gate weighing several tons that could be dropped in an instant. Between the gates stretched narrow passageways, lined with murder holes above. If enemies entered, they became living targets, with the exits sealed in front and behind. It was a steel trap, where fear killed faster than arrows or stones. Warwick also boasted two famous towers: Caesar's Tower and Guy's Tower. Caesar's Tower, built in the 14th century, rose more than 40 meters high, like a mountain of stone. From here, sentries could scan for miles, spotting invaders long before they arrived. Guy's Tower, larger and even more imposing, was built as a statement of the Warwick lord's unbreakable power. Locals said that enemies would falter the moment they saw its shadow looming in the distance. But these towers were not just defensive structures. They were psychological weapons, symbols reminding everyone that the lords of Warwick stood above them, gazing down over the land like invincible gods. What set Warwick apart from Krak or Caerphilly was its deep understanding of the power of image and propaganda. The people of the region lived constantly in the looming shadow of its towers. Every day they looked upon the stone giants, a reminder that power was always above them. For distant enemies too, the sight of Warwick, with its sheer walls and colossal towers, was enough to defeat them halfway in their minds. In other words, Warwick transformed architecture into psychological warfare. Without loosing a single arrow, the castle could make its enemies tremble. The key difference between modern bank security and medieval castles lies in adaptability. While today's systems are fixed and predictable, castles constantly evolved. Each defensive ring was designed to neutralize the very tactic that had succeeded against the previous layer. Breach the outer wall, you immediately fall into the courtyard, where archers from walls more than 10 meters high rain arrows down on your head, leaving you no cover. Break through the outer gate, you are instantly funneled into a narrow corridor between two walls, where just a few dozen defenders can hold back hundreds of attackers. It is no coincidence the Welsh called such places killing grounds. And perhaps the most devious invention was the angled entrance, forcing attackers to turn sharply at 90 degrees as they advanced. For weapons like battering rams, which required dozens of men to charge in a straight line, that turn rendered them almost useless. Modern banks prioritize convenience, straight hallways, easy access. By contrast, medieval architects understood that true security meant inconvenience. Every passage inside a castle forced the enemy to split apart, move as individuals, and be destroyed one by one. In the Middle East and Europe, famous castles often relied on thick stone walls, deep moats, and towering keeps. But in India, in the 16th century, there arose a fortress that followed a different path. This was Golconda Fort, near present-day Hyderabad. Golconda was built atop a granite hill more than 120 meters high, sprawling across dozens of square kilometers. Its walls wound along the terrain for up to 10 kilometers, with more than 80 watchtowers. Yet the fort's uniqueness did not lie in its walls, but in the way sound echoed within its architecture. The Qutb Shahi architects cleverly used the properties of stone and arches to create an acoustic alarm system. Right beneath the main gate, Fateh Darwaza, the Victory Gate, if you clap your hands or shout, the sound reverberates and travels hundreds of meters, reaching even the highest tower. This served as a signal to guards that someone, whether guest or enemy, was approaching. What is astonishing is that this system required no modern technology, relying solely on the arrangement of domes, corridors, and stone walls. In times of war, Golconda turned sound into a weapon. An attacker entering the gate could be detected by the faintest noise. The sound of footsteps, the clash of weapons, everything echoed, betraying the position of the invaders. The defenders, on the other hand, could use acoustics to communicate and send signals swiftly throughout the fort. While many Western castles depended on watchful sentries with keen eyes and ears, Golconda possessed a built-in natural alarm system hidden in its very design. Golconda was not only a fortress but also the economic heart of the region. Merchants from Persia, Arabia, Central Asia, and even Europe flocked here to trade in precious gems. Enormous diamonds were cut, polished, exchanged, and carried by caravans across the world. But this treasure also made Golconda a target for powerful empires, from the Mughals in the north to later invading forces. And in each assault, sound proved its defensive power. In 1687, Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb resolved to bring Golconda down. He surrounded the fortress with a massive army. For months, every direct assault failed. The walls held firm, the watchtowers bristled with archers and cannon, and the acoustic system foiled every attempt at a stealthy approach to the gates. Even today, visitors to Hyderabad can clap beneath Fateh Darwaza and hear the echoes ripple outward like magic. It is not merely a tourist trick, it is a living remnant of an ancient security system. Golconda teaches us that security does not always have to be visible. A thick wall can be breached, a gate can be broken, but an invisible alarm system like sound is far harder to overcome. Stop for a moment and imagine this. A modern bank with glowing electronic billboards, shiny glass doors, and automated ATMs suddenly transformed into a 21st century version of a medieval fortress. No more fragile glass walls waiting to be shattered. Instead, 4-meter-thick stone walls, layered one after another like Krak de Chevaliers, would encircle the building. No more single revolving doors. Instead, customers would pass through a sequence of fortified gates like at Warwick Castle, massive steel doors one after another, narrow corridors fitted with sensors and 360-degree cameras, turning every passerby into a hostage inside the zone of control. No more wide-open parking lots. Instead, there would be a modern moat like at Caerphilly Castle, but filled not with water, rather with motion sensors and high-voltage electric fences. And finally, instead of relying only on silent alarms, the bank would be equipped with a Golconda-style acoustic system. Every footstep, every tunnel dug underground, every vibration would be amplified and transmitted directly to the surveillance center. This would no longer be a bank. It would be the digital age's impregnable fortress. Now imagine if the 2005 Fortaleza heist had taken place at such a modern medieval bank. When the robbers began digging their tunnel, seismic sensors would have immediately flagged unusual underground movement. As they approached the foundations, the acoustic detectors would have picked up the sound of pickaxes striking stone. When a group tried to enter inside, they would have been trapped in a deadly corridor, cameras, steel gates, and choke points, turning the passage into a Warwick-style kill zone. And even if one intruder somehow reached the inner chambers, they would find themselves drowning in concentric layers of digital data, unable to locate the real vault, only encountering virtual moats designed to mislead. The result? Instead of vanishing with $70 million, the gang would likely have been caught the moment the first shovel hit the earth. Looking back at the medieval castles from Krak des Chevaliers, Caerphilly, and Warwick to Golconda, we discover a common principle. Security is not about how tall the walls are, but about how far ahead you have planned. Krak teaches us about layered defenses. Caerphilly teaches us how nature itself can become a weapon. Warwick teaches us about the psychology of fear. Golconda teaches us about perception, sound, and early warning systems. If we combined all of these principles into a modern bank, we would create a fortress that even the most sophisticated technology would struggle to penetrate. So next time you step into a gleaming, modern bank, surrounded by transparent glass and high-tech cameras, remember the moss-covered stone walls of the past. Perhaps, deep down, we have never truly surpassed the genius of those who built castles hundreds of years ago. Only now, instead of stone and arrows, we use concrete, electronics, and data. And maybe one day, those ancient principles of security will return, stronger than ever, in the form of fortress banks of the 21st century. If you believe history can illuminate the present in this way, then ask yourself, how many priceless lessons have we already lost, simply because we thought the past was more primitive than today? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video to spread the story, because sometimes, to protect the future, we must look back to the past.